What do we mean by mass media? Well, media can mean a lot of different things, but commonly people will use media to mean specifically news media, and they'll think Fox, CNN, CBS, etc. When they talk about the media, right? Um, but in actuality, mass media can be a number of different things. It could be music, TV, movies, books, blogs, podcasts, anything that is made for the masses. Because in fact, mass media is media made for the masses. It is made to be consumed. It is made to inform. It is made to entertain. Now, the degree that it does all of these things is debatable. Some media is better than others in those categories I just mentioned. And that can bring criticism uh, when media is too boring or not informative, or the opposite if it's misinformative. And this presentation is meant to be not meant to be a complete analysis of media consumerism and advertising, though I would have loved to talk about those a little deeper. Um, the biggest thing that we're going to talk, you know what? Let's just get going here. Let's dive in. When leftists discuss media, they often find themselves split up into two different camps here. Um, we will often agree in framing it as sort of a omnipresent force that tries to direct our attention and consumerism to enforce the ruling class ideas, businesses, and practices. When the question of what can we do about it arises, we find ourselves in two broad camps. One camp seeks more accountability, integrity, and better reporting. The other camp sees the media as a tool solely for the capitalist class that reinforces capitalist ideas. Noam Chomsky's theory of manufactured consent gets talked about quite a bit in this article, and in my opinion, dragged through the mud a couple of times. I'm willing to let it go, but I'm going to keep bringing it up during tonight's talk. Uh, in Chomsky's theory of manufactured consent, he argues that corporate ownership results in the interest of the ruling class being the loudest channels of our media, which in turn influences our ideas, feelings of self-worth, sense of community, and as I've said before, consumerism. The idea of free press is a tenet that many Americans hold right next to free speech and democracy. Chomsky very much disagreed with this idea and scoffed at the idea that mass media could act as a check on political power. The idea that media tells us what we need to know when we need to know it, often in a matter-of-fact way, it feels reassuring to many people. But is that reassurance always warranted? Consider the role that the media plays in our elections in reinforcing ideas of democracy and fairness, always within a capitalist framework. To add to the other disagreements I have with the author, I'm also more critical on the amount of creative control that media workers have over their work. I strongly disagree with the dismissive nature taken towards understanding how the media operates. I believe that basic media analysis skills are something that everyone should and needs to practice, especially Marxists who seek to engage and inspire people in the modern world to inspire a more class-conscious society. Understanding how and why the media operates as it does is a powerful step towards dismantling enemy propaganda and fighting narratives that are often pro-capitalist and anti-communist. To start off, there are 5 filters to Chomsky's theory of manufactured consent. The first one is ownership. It's likely no surprise to most of the people on this call that the majority of the media out there is owned by a very few companies uh, that disguise themselves as many companies. But they are in fact all under the same umbrella. Media outlets are often owned by large corporations or wealthy individuals whose priorities are profit and maintaining the status quo, potentially leading to biased reporting. Mass media companies are owned by big corporations who are often part of even bigger corporate conglomerates. This means that the market can be flooded with competition, but in reality, it's only six octopi wearing sock puppets. There have been quite a few recent changes in media ownership over the last few years. Um, as you can see, the slide says Big Six, but because of recent events, we're actually down to Big Five, which we'll be talking about a little bit later here. Some other big things that we'll talk about is Disney bought 21st Century Fox, which was the movie film side of News Corp. News Corp, that's the Fox News network that we all love. The other big news here is that Paramount bought Viacom CBS. Uh, Viacom CBS was previously the other big six that would have been on this list, but they have been consumed by the larger fish, it would seem. The second filter in the theory of manufactured consent is the cost of media operations. Media relies on advertising revenue, which can make them susceptible to the influence of advertisers, who may withdraw support if coverage is deemed unfavorable. Advertisers pay corporations to promote their commodity to consumers. While there are rules around advertising, they're loose and do nothing to prevent wealthier voices from dominating the space. Advertisers become part of the corporate interest and thus gain a shield from criticism. Now, you may feel that commercials are corporations trying to sell you a product, but it feels more accurate to say that in reverse. The corporations are actually selling you to advertisers. The media corporations know who is going to watch the Super Bowl. In the modern day, there are algorithms that use consumer metadata to know who is interested in what based on their geographical region. So it's even possible for advertisers to pin down not only who is going to watch a Super Bowl, but who in your neighborhood is going to watch the Super Bowl. That is the power that advertisers have over you through this shared network of metadata information that is for sale. We talk about this all the time with the databases that Palantir is building to track immigrants, people with disabilities, etc. To come back to on topic here. Advertisers want everyone's money, even the money of activists and socialists. So we shouldn't be surprised when media adjacent to our ideas comes loaded with advertisements and merchandising. In fact, this is probably one of the biggest criticisms that I have over excessive media consumption. You think that you are consuming media that fits within your politics, within your ideas, but it all plays a bigger role in this consumption, supporting big business, supporting capitalism, fitting into the machine. The third filter is, how does the establishment manage the media? By the establishment, I mean the government. Powerful institutions like governments and corporations provide news sources with narratives and officials to influence media coverage. Bourgeois society creates institutions that support capitalism and corresponding ideas such as liberalism, conservatism, and the abstract concept of freedom. And these get a lot more play than any sort of ideas that actually go against the grain of capitalist ideology, which of course, capitalist ideology is dominant in the media because, well, capitalism is everywhere. Capitalism dominates everything. And we see this most during times of civil unrest and struggle. We can see these very strong disconnects between what journalists are saying on TV and what is actually happening on the ground. Whether we're talking about occupied Palestine, the student encampments, Black Lives Matter protests, the mainstream media has a clear bias towards capital, even if it means twisting the truth or not reporting it at all. After all, having an expert on your show lends you more credibility. So to have an expert on your show versus a bunch of rowdy college students in the street, who is the average viewer supposed to put their trust in? The fourth filter is flack. When media outlets challenge powerful interests, they face negative repercussions like criticism, lawsuits, boycotts, discouraging critical reporting. Anytime a journalist attempts to challenge the hegemony of the ruling class in the media, the authority of professionalism and objectivity comes into play and constitutes the journalist as an activist or other other horrible things that they might say in an attempt to try to discredit them. They won't allow you to try to tell they won't allow you to try to tell your story unless it is from the vantage of the ruling class. You have to play within their framework, or they will either put you in the 3 a.m. time slot when no one is awake and no one is watching it. And if you do agree with their capitalist values, they will put you in the 7 p.m. time spot, which everyone is watching because they just got finished with dinner. The last filter that we'll talk about is a common enemy. The media needs a common enemy for many of its narratives. Creating a shared enemy, such as a communist threat or a terrorist group, allows media to manipulate public opinion and justify certain actions or policies. We can see that the media works in conjunction with our governments to help our governments pass these policies. Again, I can throw back to nearly every protest or every social action or movement that has taken place over the last few decades. We can see Fox News with headlines that completely mischaracterize movements like BLM. It happens every handful of years when the Western Empire finds an oil reserve they want. They call out the most extremist group. They don't bring up the fact that the US government probably created this extremist group or funded this extremist group. But suddenly, this extremist group is the world's largest threat. And we must stop at nothing to take them out. And now this is the media narrative. But of course, the objective reality, we could probably do a body count here and see who's killing the most. But I don't think the US or the UK would like it if we did that. Now, the author of tonight's reading states, the first step in understanding media in a dialectical way is understanding that content itself is not directly handled by the bosses. Working journalists and media workers, not the bosses, actually produce the content of the media. The boss does not stand around the newsroom micromanaging the flow of information. The direct control exerted by the owners of capital is over how media is distributed. In other words, the bosses directly control factors as marketing, positioning, and broadcasting direction of the media. Largely, what they're saying is true. The author does call out the firing of Fox News journalists for reporting on links between Monsanto GMOs and cancer in their article that we read tonight. But they also say that 9 times out of 10, control of the final product ultimately remains with the workers. I see this as a mischaracterization of what a newsroom is and how it operates. As if newsrooms are akin to some kind of group college art project. It's a job, just like every other job. To say media workers get final say 9 out of 10 times may be partially correct, but that's not to say that they are able to broadcast whatever they want. I believe the author understands this, but it feels like inconsistent framing, in my opinion. The author and I also disagree that you don't need to know how the inside of a newsroom works. Well, I'm defiantly going to take you on a brief tour of what I remember my time at a newsroom being. For those that don't know, in a past life, before I went back to college for computer science, I actually worked in a newsroom for almost 4 years. I spent half of that time as a production assistant, and then the rest of that time I spent as a producer, which sounds like a very fancy title, but I assure you it's not. Uh, so, who are the media workers? Who puts the TV, or I guess who puts the light inside of your TV is the better way to frame that. Well, you have production assistants. These are the people that are operating cameras during live shows, cutting commercial spots. And by cutting commercial spots, I mean not actually putting a commercial together. I mean a business sent them, I mean an advertising company sent them a reel that had a lot of commercials on it, face to butt. And the production assistant's job is to go in and to cut those videos out and to put them in our system so that they can go through and play on air for everyone else to see. Not very creative, not a whole lot of control, but it is video work and it is a place to start. Sometimes they also help the news crews edit video or make graphics for their show. But again, a lot of these are video that is already pre-approved by the corporate office, graphics packages that have been pre-approved by marketing teams, etc. All of these graphics have to go through directors and editors before they even make it on air. Master control, which is actually a pretty impressive position. An underappreciated position, I might add. They control what goes on air. If you see it on TV, they flip the switch to put it there. They monitor the channels and commercials to make sure that advertisers get the time slots that they paid for. They're also critical when doing live video from remote locations because they have to flip all the switches to give it to you. You have audio engineers that have ears like bats, and they make sure that the audio comes through crisp and clean. As you can see in these pictures that I have here, there are about 100 different video feeds in front of these directors. And you cannot keep track of all those on your own. So you need an audio expert that can go in there and make sure that all those audio levels are coming through and at the correct volumes. Lastly, on this side, we have the news director. They control how the show is aired. When you watch the news and the camera's cut from a close-up shot of the desk to an over-the-shot desk to an overshot, or I'm sorry, to an over-the-shoulder shot of another reporter, or when it goes to the weather at the different wall completely or someone at the live feed, those decisions are made by the news director. They are literally standing by live, calling out directions, and people are doing them. They're the ones that choreograph the entire news operation. They work close with news producers to create visually appealing shows that are more engaging to viewers. This is important. Multiple studies show that the brain is more active when there are short, quick, rapid changing shots within a video, which is why it's important for news directors and producers to work together, because you want a show that is engaging, that people are listening to, because they're going to absorb your propaganda easier that way. Whereas if you just have a still shot of two people sitting at a desk that never moves, that's boring, that is understimulating, and people are going to change the channel. So it is the director and the producer's job to work together on this fact to create an engaging show. Next, we'll go down to the newsroom. Some days I wish I would have listened to the news director that told me, Kat, please don't go to the newsroom. Kat, you don't want to go to the newsroom. Don't do it. But I thought that I knew better and I went to the newsroom. I worked, as I said earlier today, I worked about a year and a half as a producer. That would be down here on the bottom left or on the bottom right in the dark blue box, about midway up. Uh, my days consisted of two 1 hour shows. So 2 hour shows in total, with about an hour lunch, 4 to 5 hours of writing and prep. That's 5 hours to write video scripts for 2 hours, to come up with graphics, to determine who's going to be reading what, to setting up live shots, to doing a number of various different things. And that's a lot to do within 5 hours. I'm not trying to complain. This is a life that I've left behind a long time ago. But there's a lot of pressure to do a lot in a small amount of time. And I think that that's something that a lot of workers on this call are going to relate to. It doesn't leave a whole lot of room for creativity, especially given that anything that you put in your show that may be rubbing against the grain has to go through multiple levels of approval before it reaches air. And as the author of tonight's article said, only an authoritative workplace would have a manager that's micromanaging what everyone is writing. Okay, well, let me tell you about a program called iNews. iNews is a program that reporters use to write all of their stories, and anyone in the newsroom can see what anyone else is working on in their show, and that includes your boss. So your boss can tune in to what you're writing in your show at any time and critique what you are doing. And it happens a lot. Sometimes it's good. A lot of the times it's bad. I'm sure we've all had experiences with micromanaging managers before, varying degrees of helpfulness. But as you can see, there is a lot there is a lot of separation. You do not have complete power over everything that goes out over live broadcast. There are disciplinary actions that are taken when you step out of line. And by step out of line, I don't even mean you're saying something that's anti-capitalist or anti-consumer or anti-whatever. It could be something as simple as the producer or the lead, the head, sorry, I'm forgetting all the terms here. Our editor-in-chief thinks that there wasn't enough you know, weather coverage in your show. And you can get disciplined for that. Ask me how I know. So let's get into the creative process here for writing in the newsroom. As I mentioned, there's not a whole lot of time to come up with all the information that you're going to be putting in a show. There's very strict deadlines. These aren't communist propaganda meetings that we're going to where you can be 5 minutes late. If you're 5 minutes late to your broadcast, you are already on the phone with the CEO explaining why you should keep your job. That's how tight the deadlines in news are. If you are not ready the very second, and I don't mean the second on your watch, the second on your computer, I mean the second that all the capitalists around the world are watching, if you are not ready the second that your show goes live, there is hell to pay. That is how tight these deadlines are. So there's not a whole lot of wiggle room there. Content within a local newsroom, from my perspective, I worked at a station that was about middle market. This content comes through a subscription service as a means to save time. After all, it would be very hard for me to fill a 2 hour show in only 4 hours. That's a lot of video. What would I do every day? How would I come up with that much content every day in such a small amount of time? Well, the answer to that is pre-packaged content. Sometimes it's just a generic video from an event. This is often called B-roll, footage of people walking, random cars driving, scenery, things like that. Other times it can be sound bites or full interviews. These are common for politicians and celebrities. But reporters can also upload their complete and edited content to these resources to download as well. It's not uncommon for local news stations to air video that was filmed, written, and even edited by a completely different person in a completely different state. But they subtly suggest that it's their newsroom reporting on this. This is the prestige of the trick. You think it's a story someone at the station created, but it isn't that way at all. In fact, the producer likely copy-pasted the script and the video into their show with few other thoughts on the matter. After all, how long do you think it would take to write up 2 hours of content? Determining which anchor is reading what stories, what kind of graphics do you want with them, what kind of video or sound do you want displayed? Do you have a reporter out at a live shot? Does your reporter even have a story for you? Oh God, please tell me that's not breaking news that I'm hearing over the scanners. How much creative control do you think a producer has over their own broadcast in this very, very specific example that I'm giving? Now, where me and the author do agree, as dialectical materialists, we must look at the internal contradictions in any phenomena. Nothing is static and unchanging, and internal contradictions themselves are the motor force of change and development. Small quantitative changes accumulate over time and lead to qualitative leaps, changing the entire character of the system. The author of tonight's reading leads into Italian communist Antonio Gramsci to discuss a phenomenon called hegemony, in which the state exerts its control on workers not only through coercive means, but also through cultural conditioning. When a bourgeois society presents its values as neutral, the ruling class presents its interests as the interests of the general public. It becomes common sense to many. When workers advocate for things like free markets, they do so because of ruling class hegemony. But Gramsci believed that workers could overcome the ideas of the ruling class by promoting cultural values that expose the contradictions of these so-called norms. This sort of normalization is critical in suppressing political struggle, where even the most mundane of marches can be framed as radical. I myself have been to a few actions where I thought it was pretty quiet and know nothing, only to get home and see that the news is calling it a riot. uh, so to wrap this section, I'm going to quote the author. The important point to note here is that to Gramsci, the domination of capitalist ideology is not an inescapable reality. It is not automatically determined by the material base, i.e., the private ownership of the media outlet. Therefore, the eradication of bourgeois ideas and values can only begin with the mass struggle of the workers against capital society and can be completed in the final analysis only at the end of that society. A question that gets discussed often in media college courses is who is influencing who? If I make a movie I love, but no one else does, is it still art? If I make a painting that I don't love, but I know you will, is it still art? Well, it's both. Unfortunately, that line is not so easy to determine. To again hammer on my own case about why media analysis is so important, let's do some of it. Sorry for the jump scare. Does anyone remember when the internet bullied a video production company into changing Sonic so that he didn't have big human teeth? A lot of people chalk that up as a win. I chalk it up as a win. I like the new Sonic better than what they tried to give us. This awkward awkward guy on the left here. I much prefer the guy on the right, just personally. But I'm sorry, Sonic. I'm gonna have to be a little hard on you tonight. Actually, I'm gonna be pretty hard on you tonight. In the Sonic movie universe, the Master Emerald is hidden because of the Echidna tribe, who were its original guardians. They were wiped out in a conflict with the Owls, who then hid the emerald for fear of its immense power being misused. Knuckles, the last of the Echidna, is on a quest to find it, believing it will restore honor to his tribe. The Owls, fearing the potential for misuse, they stole the Master Emerald and hid it away. I know a lot of you on this call are probably very confused at this point. I'm so sorry. I promise it will make sense in a little bit here. The Master Emerald. What is this thing? Well, you don't really need to know a whole lot about it. It was created to bring balance to chaos. That's all you really need to know. And we can see in this top left corner, sorry, this top right corner here, there's an owl. Behind this owl, we have, well, they're called the echidnas. Echidna is an actual animal here on Earth. It's the one that the character Knuckles is based on. But here in the movie, uh, they're portrayed as fairly tribal, somewhat primitive. They paint their faces, they wear skulls, they have very crude bows and spears that they use as weapons. They throw rocks. Is any of this spurring some ideas in people? So the owl stole the emerald that they had, this emerald that is supposed to bring balance to chaos. The owl steals the emerald from them because no one should have that much power. Well, but now the owl has it. So it's not really so much that no one should have it. It's the owl should have it, right? Of course, the owl hides it in a place where no one can find it. But of course, the plot eventually leads them to need to find it. And so they go and they find it. This reeks of colonizer to me. This, how many times do we see this sort of dehumanization and this sort of you are too powerful, so I have to take your toys away. Um, but it's a one-sided relationship here because now this person has the too powerful, has the weapon that's too powerful. I'm sorry, I'm failing in this analysis here. Um, Also very problematic in the Sonic movies, all three of them, is this guy on the left here, Donut Lord, who is a police officer. Um, Not the kind of messaging that I want to see in a kid's movie. Um, there's a lot of other things that a kid could do besides be a police officer if they want to make the world a better place. In fact, most other things would be better than that option. Uh, let's take this a little further, and maybe we'll see where I'm going with all this here. Hey, Knuckles! It's the guy I was talking about in the last slide. So here on the left, he's looking a little Texas Rangery, right? We got Cop, Donut Lord Cop here with his propaganda. We make a spin-off series here. We don't have the cop in it, but also we make Knuckles a cop. Uh, I want to talk about a specific episode in the new Knuckles series. Uh, I'm going to state it here, just to cover all of our bases, because I know this is going to be put up on YouTube. Uh, Zionism is not the same thing as Judaism. To equate the actions of a violent state of Israel to all Jewish people, that's anti-Semitic. Zionism is by definition a colonialist movement. That's what the founders of Zionism said about it. And it should never be conflated with Judaism. I also want to say there's nothing wrong with having an episode where a cartoon character sits down for Shabbat. It can be a great educational opportunity, and it gives Jewish children a sense of belonging. But there's more to see here if we peek just under the surface level. To start, the scene contains four characters: Knuckles, who is our Texas Ranger, a cop, in the picture on the right, he's the guy on the left, an FBI agent. Can you find that one? I know it's hard. And a Jewish mom, who's the one in the middle. You may not realize it now, but that lady is an amazing fighter. Just incredible with just martial arts, throwing people through walls. She's got it. The FBI agent is also suspiciously in uniform throughout the entire episode, even though it's a holiday dinner. Now, when you make a movie and you have actors show up to film, you don't just tell them wear whatever you have on your floor, wear whatever you feel like. You dress people up. You put them in intentional clothing. They are intentionally dressed as an FBI agent throughout the entire episode. The question, why? How does this play into the scene? What is this communicating to us? During the dinner conversation, the two kids start to bicker between each other, the cop and the FBI agent, and the mom intervenes. So help me God, do not make me use Krav Maga in my own house. The cop then explains that the mom is a Krav Maga instructor and makes sure to tell the audience that Krav Maga is Israeli self-defense. Knuckles responds excitedly, "Oh, you train warriors as well." Specifically, Krav Maga is Israeli martial arts developed for the IOF. It's derived between a combination of Aikido, Judo, Karate, boxing, and wrestling. And this episode comes to a crescendo when we see some bad guys show up, and the mom has to fight alongside Knuckles to save the day. By the way, awkward time to bring this up, but the big slide, the big five slide from earlier in Paramount. Yeah. Well, here's their stance that they have released. This openly condemning Hamas, standing with the people of Israel, Zionist propaganda, as far as I'm concerned. How about World War Z? Anyone remember World War Z from, I think, 2013, or maybe you read the book that was released sometime in the early 2000s? So, sorry, let me back up. One of the big differences here between the movie and the book is what countries get featured in the movie, whereas the book has a much broader worldwide coverage. The movie seems to focus specifically on Canada briefly, the United States, and Israel. Now, in the movie World War Z, Israel initially fortifies itself against the zombie outbreak by constructing a massive wall around Jerusalem. Let me know if you've heard this one before. Effectively containing the threat, the outside threat. However, the wall ultimately fails when there's the sound of celebration from within, from a group of Palestinian Muslim presenting people in the crowd who pick up microphones. And if you watch the scene, they pick up a microphone and it gives one of those shrill, loud screeching sounds that's very discomforting for the ear to hear. And it cuts to the zombies on the outside and they hear it. What is it that brings the zombies into Israel during World War Z? The sound of celebrating Palestinians is what brings them in droves. Look at that photo on the bottom right. The zombies are climbing each other like insects to get into Israel because Israel let Palestinians come into their walls. What's the messaging here? It feels pretty clear. But I also want to talk about one more thing here. During this scene, the helicopter is flying over above, just with a machine gun, attacking all of the zombies that are out around outside this wall. And they look like insects. There's so many of them. And like I said, they're stacking on top of each other, trying to get in here. Okay, for those of us that know how the zombie virus works, who are most of these zombies? And where did they come from? Are these zombies from Egypt? Are these zombies from Yemen or Lebanon? Are these zombies from Palestine? Is this movie portraying people outside of Israel as zombies being mowed down by the IDF from a helicopter? Because that is sort of the imagery that I'm getting here. Oh, perhaps it doesn't surprise you. Um, who made World War Z? Oh, whoops. I'm almost done here, I promise. I know I'm running long. Stephen Colbert has publicly addressed everyone about the merger between Paramount Global and Skydance Media, uh, with humored criticism as he always does, especially in the wake of his cancellation. So what did Stephen Colbert do? Many of you on this call know that Stephen Colbert's show is coming to an end now. Suddenly, even though he's a very popular guy still, I know that some of us probably, don't watch the show anymore, but the liberal audience, they love him. He's losing his show. Well, Colbert described Paramount's $16 million settlement of a lawsuit filed by Donald Trump against CBS's 60 Minutes program as a big fat bribe on his show. He linked the settlement to Paramount's desire to gain the Trump administration's approval for the merger. Colbert and others have raised concerns that the merger would lead to pressure on Paramount-owned media outlets, including news divisions, to be less critical of the Trump administration. Colbert mocked the combined ticker symbol for Paramount Skydance, which changed from Para to P-Sky. While Paramount has stated that the cancellation of The Late Show was purely a financial decision, many people, including Colbert, have suggested that is a connection with the merger and trying to cater to the Trump administration. Oh, Trump. The South Park season that is currently playing, one of the more recent episodes, satirizes Donald Trump being in bed with Satan. People that have been following the series for a long time know that Satan used to date Saddam Hussein. He has now moved on to his new boyfriend, Donald Trump. This, again, the plot references Trump's lawsuit against CBS and the $16 million settlement, as well as his tariffs on Canada, the bombing of Iran, or Iraq, as it's confusingly said in the episode. Additionally, the episode critiques the rise of Power Christian Principle at South Park Elementary, the end of NPR, the changing social climate, and transgender people being excluded from public bathrooms. And the episode's title is also a play on Paramount, with the title being Sermon on the Mount. Speaking of Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is in this episode. And he's surrounded by a bunch of protesters that are mad that Jesus is in school. No, not like that. Like he had to go to a school. In this episode, Jesus explains that he's not going to school to try to preach to children, but he's going to school because he's involved with a lawsuit. Sorry, I'm getting lost in my notes here. When he tries to warn the townspeople, referencing the recent lawsuit between Paramount and Trump, he says, the guy can do whatever he wants now that someone backed down. You guys saw what happened to CBS. Well, guess who owned CBS? Paramount. You really want to end up like Colbert? You guys got to stop being so stupid. More instances of the media speaking out against corporate interest. When it comes to media production, while some creative control does rest with the workers, they're not so different from other industries. If media workers are free to pepper in socialist themes because their boss does not always micromanage them, the same is true for drive-through workers having the opportunity to slip a pamphlet of state and revolution into your Happy Meal. There are systems in place that will punish, discipline, and make examples out of media workers, just as workers of every other industry. This is the material reality we reside in today. Now, I do not want to undermine the importance that journalists and media makers can make in a revolutionary action. In fact, seizing the means of telecommunication was one pillar in the successful strategy that Lenin used during the October revolutions and the preceding actions that came after. Now, media production, like other forms of labor under capitalism, is a site of class struggle. Journalists and media workers must fight against capitalist control as their work is inherently shaped by it. Under capitalism, so-called objective journalism reinforces bourgeois ideology by promoting a narrow, elite-controlled narrative. Even public media like PBS and NPR are influenced by corporate interest and lack genuine democratic control. Under socialism, media would be publicly owned and democratically managed by workers, free from profit motive. This would allow for a broader, more authentic range of viewpoints, artistic expression, and revolutionary journalism. Newsrooms would be democratic, and access to media production tools would be allocated based on public support. Social media, though somewhat democratizing, is still owned by corporations and subject to capital constraints. I'm meaning mostly Twitch when I talk about this. People talk about Twitch as though it's a free, open platform for you to say whatever you want. That is not true. The author emphasizes that alternative and socialist media are valuable, but cannot fully replace mass media without a broader transformation of ownership. Ultimately, media liberation is tied to the global socialist revolution, and media workers should be seen as allies in the struggle against capitalism.